My name's Margaret Reynolds, and today I'm talking with Bronwyn Kelly. Welcome, Bronwyn.
Thank you.
We want to find new ways for Australians to use new approaches that enable them to set a fresh agenda for the way our parliaments work. Parliamentarians, I suppose, have become rather set in their ways. There are traditional ways of the parliament functioning. And what it means is that priorities, the real priorities of real Australians, get lost or not prioritised as they should be. So how will your proposal and the work you're doing help Australians to better engage with their parliament and their parliamentarians and encourage us to do things in a different way so that we get a better outcome for all?
Right. Well, that's the centre of the whole project that we're doing at Australian Community Futures Planning. Really what we're working on is processes that Australians can use to create a better relationship with whoever we elect. And we think that requires them, everyone to have some clarity of understanding about what is our preferred national agenda. And so what we're doing at ACFP is working on processes that would help Australians build that. We think it's Australians that have to build it before politicians can build it, really. And what we're proposing is that we kind of switch around the order in which we approach elections and try to set up our parliaments and governments. So the proposal is simply to insert an extra step into the federal election process. So before we vote, let's describe what we want our parliaments to do for us over the long term by 2050, or on some issues by 2030. So let's tell the candidates what we want to achieve together as a nation. We've never done that before. So at Australian Community Futures Planning, where I've been working for the last 4 years, we've been trialling a process by which Australians can do exactly that. It's called, rather dryly, National Integrated Planning and Reporting, which sounds a bit dull, but it's really just a way of helping Australians talk with each other in an orderly manner to describe their preferred future. That's all it is. And to do that outside the adversarialism of politics. So this planning and reporting process creates a space in which everyday Australians can work together efficiently. We're very big on efficiency here, to build an agenda that gives a better future for everyone, not just a better future. The best one we can imagine as a nation. So I'd ask you to stretch yourself. What do I really want my governments to achieve for us? So it's a reversal, really, of the way we run elections now. In the past, it was the candidates who set their preferred agendas, and we really had no choice to vote but for whoever was standing up, be they an independent or from a party. We had a bit of attitude in that we have a preferential voting system. But in many cases, what that did was lock us into having to vote for the least worst agenda. It was especially, and that happened especially on occasions where we weren't being offered by any candidate as much as we need to, have a better future as a nation. So in this new system that we've been trialling, Australians simply craft their own preferred agenda before they vote. Look, they write it down. So everyone can see it, including the candidates. And with this in hand, they can see for themselves which candidates might be more or less committed to that agenda. The idea is that gradually, and this might take, 2 or 3 more election cycles, candidates will come forward who'll say, well, yeah, I'm willing to have a shot at making that agenda a reality. It's a pretty great agenda. And you vote for me and I'll give it a go. So it's a big, new, exciting opportunity to release both voters and those we elect from the narrow agendas that serve some and not others, or, make big winners and big losers. And so overall, what we're trying to do with this is to build a better relationship between voters and those they elect. And we can do this in this new system because they and we will know what we actually want to do. Once they get into Parliament, they can then argue less about that and just get on with it, get on with doing what we value and want.
Yes. Look, it sounds very exciting. It sounds very encouraging. But it also sounds very challenging when you put your ideas together with what we've currently got. So how feasible do you think it is to introduce such an agenda that will be rejected by some in the Parliament already, and others who are trying to get there, although they might be more enthusiastic because they can work directly with the community? But how will we change the party structure, the entire parliamentary process? Have you got any ideas on that?
Yes, I have a very realistic sense of how it can change and how long it will take to change. I always said this would take a decade, and my experience of doing it at local government level took a decade. So it's going to take a decade at this level too. So, but the fact is that Australians do have the ability to do this. So do political parties. They have the ability to get together with us on, call it a common agenda, if you like. And this is an agenda, the way we've built it is that we're trying to make space for everybody to get, for everybody to feel that they can have a future in that type of nation. So it's supposed to be inclusive and recognition. It's supposed to recognise the diversity of Australians. So we do, there are really good things that Australians can capitalise on in their culture that will help make this a reality. They do know what they value and want, and they do value social cohesion. That can be built on. So what we haven't had now, though, we've got all that, but what we haven't had is a process we can use to build that sort of agenda in an orderly manner. And that's one in which everyone gets a fair go. There are less winners and less losers.
Now, for instance, we know that the Teals, as a newer political grouping, though they're not a grouping, I know they're individuals who run as independents, but they've used kitchen table meetings to try to encourage people to relax and just talk about what is important to them. And that's been very successful. I guess the Labor Party would argue that they've tried to introduce a bigger version of that. They call it town hall meetings, where people come together and ask questions and set their priorities. But it's not, I guess there will be many people who are disengaged from the process. How can we ensure that they feel that they have an opportunity too?
Well, this certainly opens up an opportunity not just to enter, have kitchen table conversations or town hall conversations. It opens up an opportunity in a non-intimidating way to have a national conversation. A conversation at the national level is a bit bigger than what we've been experimenting with in Australian society via kitchen tables or town hall meetings, as you describe them. So in the kitchen table process, we can see this in the sort of inclusive agenda setting process that I'm talking about here. You can see it working in kind of a micro level. And national integrated planning and reporting, which we're working on, that's the process that I'm talking about. That's just basically using kitchen table conversations, but setting them up at the national level. So at a local community, it's pretty easy to get people together. All you have to do is get them over a cup of tea and in a non-intimidating environment to discuss what they value and want. And in those conversations, an agenda emerges that helps everyone around the table. And then they do, that's very much national integrated planning and reporting. It's this process of pick your agenda first, then go chase your preferred candidate. They don't do it the other way around. So kitchen table starts from the other end. At a national level, it's certainly trickier because the issues you have to deal with, say you're a major party, that you have to deal with multifarious issues and complex right across the nation. So a city electorate, for instance, won't have the same focus as an electorate in remote or regional Australia. So conversations about the best agenda at the national level obviously get very muddy. And the major parties really struggle with that, this muddying of the agenda before we even get to the polls, So they're trying to run candidates across nearly every electorate, and they have a hell of a time dealing with the fact that we don't have a national agenda already set. So, but that complexity of that doesn't mean that we can't work together to assemble a cohesive national agenda that caters to the full array of social, environmental, economic and cultural preferences of every different electorate. So using national IPNR, we're lifting the kitchen table to the national level. You can put it that way. Yeah. And once we do that, we can offer a chance to any candidate, be they from a major party, a minor party or an independent, to put forward their credentials as the candidate best placed to make that agenda a reality. So we're unmuddying the agenda, as it were, in our own minds before we try to select who might be best placed to make it a reality. And that has to be a good thing. I mean, you could probably sum it up this way. What we're suggesting is that we focus on what we want before we focus on who we want. And an ACFP, that's what we're hoping to give Australians, an ability to focus on what they want and build a coherent agenda to achieve it for the whole nation. Who we then select is still up to us, but we at least all have a yardstick to measure their commitment to what matters most to us. And so switching that around.
How do you see the question of leadership and the polarised way leadership is determined officially? I mean, leadership comes in many forms. There's the formal leadership of who is elected Prime Minister, but there's also the less formal approach where, some existing names in politics are already known for their leadership, though they're not Prime Minister. I mean, someone like Andrew Wilkie, a well-known independent from Tasmania, comes to mind. Someone like Senator David Pocock, Jackie Lambie, their engagement in the process of Parliament has lifted them to a stance where people regard them as leaders on particular issues or particular approaches to working within the Parliament. Now, how are we going to ensure that leadership is actually turned right around under your proposal, because it'll be the people who are the leaders. They're the ones promoting new ideas, fresh approaches, more open debates, more transparent decision-making. How is that going to work with so many leaders involved?
Well, let me start to answer that by saying that a leader is only as good as their ability to engage effectively with those they are supposedly leading. So it's all about relationships. And I wouldn't say actually that what this, the proposal of National Integrated Planning and Reporting is to try to shift the leadership role to the people. It actually isn't that. I certainly haven't been able to figure out a way that we could do that and still retain order in decision making. So somewhere we need a process where we settle the final decisions, and that process is always, hopefully in a democracy, going to be the elected parliament. And I'm certainly not suggesting that, for instance, Australians form some sort of, new type of tyranny over their governments, where they lay down the law to them. It doesn't work that way. That's not democracy. So National IPNR, a vision for Australia together and a plan to make it a reality, we take all that together. It's not an overthrow of democracy. for the parliamentary system. And I don't think Australians would be any happier with that. I mean, at least I've seen no evidence that they want to take over the parliament with some sort of people's interregnum. That could get very unruly. The evidence is more that they're looking for ways to make the parliamentary system and democracy work better for them. I mean, work more equitably for the benefit of all and for the public and national interest. But yes, I agree. Leadership in Australia you'd have to say it's been struggling, and the less they engage, the more they struggle. And that's reflected, I think, for instance, in the difficulty that the major parties have in engaging with Australians, because their primary vote is dropping, and the relationship of trust between the major parties and Australians is clearly in trouble. But even so, what we're trying out with National IPNR is not about trying to shift leadership to the people so much as it's trying to create a more productive relationship between voters and parliaments and governments, and give some terms of trust to parliaments, that, so voters can, say, this is what we're trusting you to do. The intention is to enable voters to hand over power to parliaments to finalise decisions, but with more safety for the voters. I mean, in this arrangement, parliaments will still have, full authority to use their best judgment to make good laws. Independents will still have as much latitude to use their best judgment to champion for their electorate and for the nation as a whole, which is really what every parliamentarian should do. Nothing about that would change in what we're proposing. But for the first time, they will have guidance about what a good law is. And they don't have that now. And every time we elect a government, we give them carte blanche. We hand over power without restrictions of any kind. And it's this that has enabled 21st century parliaments and governments to abuse our trust and human rights. That's why trust is dropping, because we can see that they're not behaving the way we want them to. But if everybody, including everyday Australians and parliamentarians, can take advantage of a process that allows us all to step back and write down what we really value and want, well, when we hand over power in elections of the future, we'll be at least saying what power can be used for and what it can't. Until we actually say that, we are probably going to reduce progressively the amount of trust that is there between voters and whoever they elect.
In summing up, you could actually argue that you are handing the political parties a lifeline in an era when trust is so much less than it used to be in our political process. You're offering them this lifeline to say, hey, if you engage better with your communities, if you trusted your communities, then trust would also be reciprocated better from the community itself. So it's really a very positive move from the perspective of the existing parliamentarians and political parties, if only they will engage and see that democracy is really all about partnerships, not control by one side or the other, which is where we're at, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Yes, well, we wouldn't want to propose a system that replaces one sort of tyranny with a different one.
No.
Because both of it would be unstable. History shows us that.
Yeah.
This is about giving clear terms to governments about what is our interest, what is the public interest, what is the national interest. If you want governments to be able to service that interest, you have to tell them what it is. Yeah. And that's what we're proposing.
Well, thank you very much for your time and good luck with the initiative. It's very exciting.
It is. I hope that if I could just say too, that if people want to know more about it and become involved, Australian Community Futures Planning is very keen to, everyone is welcome to participate. So if you, for instance, the best way to become involved quickly and get an understanding of what's going on is to just go to the ACFP website at www.austcfp.com.au. That's it.
Thanks, Bronwyn.
Thanks,